Welcome, story lovers. This is an original story by Areta Nwosu. The title is The Luckiest Woman in the World. Listen and enjoy. Remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel, Areta Writes Stories, and if you enjoyed this story, please also share it with those you know who would also love it. For two reasons. Soara remembered the exact date on which she had announced to her parents that she had accepted Lanre's marriage proposal. The first reason was because the week before, when she informed her parents that she had graduated from the university with a third class, her mother had hissed in tones of disgust and declared contemptuously that she had always known that Soara had inherited her father's thickness, although she had added, prophetically as it turned out later, that at least Soara's looks would be her salvation. At that, Soara's father had quietly slipped from the room. The second reason was because on the particular day of the announcement of her engagement to Lanre, the standard sour and disappointed expression on her mother's face suddenly vanished and was replaced with rapturous joy. It was something Soara had never seen happen. And then, unexpectedly, she was grabbed and enveloped in an unyielding motherly embrace. Her mother hugged her so tightly that her bones cried at the pressure, as her face was pressed into her mother's worn Ankara-clad shoulder, temporarily cutting her nose from air. When her mother finally released her, she declared to Soara in tones of pride, "You're the luckiest girl in the world." Her father beamed at this rare display of affection between the two most important women in his life. Soara smiled at her mother's obvious delight. She listened to her mother's words of praise, and all the while, a soft voice whispered in her mind, reminding her that just last week her mother had called both she and her father dunces. This week, her mother had bestowed on her the title of the luckiest woman in the world. What a change a week has made. But it was understandable. Lanre was totally different from any other man she had ever dated. He was the quintessential tall, dark, handsome, and, more importantly, rich society man, the first son of a former state governor and a present chieftain in the ruling political party in Nigeria. Her marriage to him would definitely alter her family's fort, Yuns. And so, urged on by her mother and friends, Soara married Lanre. It was a wedding that made headlines and stopped traffic. That was 10 years ago, and in that period of time, Soara had borne Lanre 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Her marriage had indeed transformed the life of her secondary school teacher parents. Gone was the rented, dingy flat in Mushin, a slum area in Lagos where she had spent her teenage years. Gone was the rickety, secondhand saloon car that her mother commandeered, while her father was forced to rely on the unreliable and inconvenient public city transportation. Gone was the frown on her mother's brow and the downturn of her lips. The parents became homeowners. They owned 2 houses, both located in expensive, elitist Ikoyi in Lagos. They lived in one and rented the other. Her parents even employed a driver, although it was Soara who paid his salary, to chauffeur them about the streets of Lagos in their brand new Jeep. Her younger brother had abandoned his post in front of the television and had become a road contractor, building state roads for millions of naira. Her marriage had wrested her brother from his position as their mother's favorite, and had installed her there, close to her mother's heart. Soara was now the topic of every conversation her mother had with her contemporaries. Somehow she always found a way to weave in Soara and Lanre's names and deeds into her banter. And now, 10 years later, these memories danced around in Soara's head as she stood in her kitchen, in front of the stainless steel gas cooker. She poured water into the chunks of raw beef and snails that were in a pot and turned on the cooker. She was preparing Lanre's favorite meal, ripe plantain pottage, even though her husband employed a live-in cook. The cook-prepared meals meant only for her and the children. Lanre insisted that it was the responsibility of a wife to cook for her husband, and therefore he decided he would eat only what she cooked. But she did not mind that. As a matter of fact, she liked that he only ate her food. Cooking for your man was one way of showing him tea. You loved him, wasn't it? According to her mother, the way to a man's heart was definitely through his stomach. And she had fallen in love with Lanre the first time she met him. Soara remembered that she had not believed it possible until it happened to her. It was on a day with temperatures hot enough to fry an egg, and Soara had been trudging by the roadside, lugging a bag of meager edibles. She had been on her way back to campus, having visited the sprawling, crowded market a kilometer away. She remembered feeling like she was being roasted over a grill, gradually becoming tender enough to eat, and all she yearned for was to return to her room and have a cool shower. She did not hear the insistent clamor of a car from behind until someone caught up with her. A tall vision with a teasing twist to his full lips, whiter than white teeth, and a promise in his coal black, K eyes that weakened her knees. It did not take too much convincing for her to follow him to his parked car. Such a gentleman, she thought to herself, as he opened the passenger door and waited for her to enter. With his laughing eyes and passionate manner, he regaled her with the account of how he pursued her with his car, leaning on his horn to get her attention. When that did not work, he pulled over and continued on foot. Soara giggled, enjoying his hungry stare and the refreshingly cool comfort of his air-conditioned car. He gave her his mobile phone number. She gave him hers. He ended up taking her to lunch. From that day on, whenever they were apart, he called her 10 to 20 times a day, wanting to know everything about her day. Soara remembered serving this morsel of information to her friends, expecting them to be glad that she had met this wonderful guy. But instead, she saw them struggle to contain that unrelenting beast with green eyes hiding beneath their friendly countenances. She saw them grit their teeth as they attempted to smile. But to their credit, they managed to shrug off their jealousy and tell her what she wanted to hear. She was lucky to have a man who cared that much for her. She was lucky to have met and married Lanre. 10 years down the line, and everyone she knew still asserted that claim, often repeating it to her. She did not contradict them, not once. Although she had once tried to talk to her mother about Lanre, her mother had interrupted her with a fierce expression. "Soara, I don't want to hear any complaints about our son-in-law." Her father, calm as usual, a man overwhelmed by his marriage to a strong, vociferous, and ambitious woman, only glanced at her with his sad, guilty eyes. She could tell that he did want to know about Lanre, but he dared not go against his wife. He had spent the best part of 38 years silently ceding control of the family to her. He would not change now. In truth, Soara was not expecting him to. She understood him because she herself liked to do more thinking and less talking. She was a quiet sort, just like her father, and so Soara had said nothing more about Lanre anyway. Instead, whenever she visited, she chatted first about her pregnancies, and then about her children. Her parents had listened proudly to the tales about the exploits of their grandchildren. Her mother insisted to her daughter that she was the luckiest woman in the world, and Soara nodded dully, aware that her father was avoiding her gaze. As she watched the beef and snails bubbled in the boiling water, Soara remembered how her friends also kept reiterating that she was the luckiest woman in the world. They loved to recount the tale of how she got married to Lanre right after she graduated from university, and how within 1 year of marriage she had fallen pregnant with her first son. 8 years later, she had become mother to 4 children. They added that she was driven around the city in a series of top-range cars. She always wore haute couture fashion. She had a cook, a chef actually, and a high-priced nanny. Her photographs appeared in celebrity print magazines and online blogs. She had everything any woman would want. Soara ached to disagree, but she saw past their bright, happy smiles to their bitter, angry eyes, and so she said nothing. She only entertained them with tales about her shopping trip to Milan, a second honeymoon with Lanre in the Maldives and such like. She paraded handbags that were worth more than their homes in front of their hungry gazes. She gushed about her perfect children. They were so busy envying her that they did not notice that she said nothing about Lanre. She added lumps of dry fish and stockfish to the boiling pot. She heard her husband's voice from the sitting room in a phone conversation with someone. He must be lolling in his favorite armchair in the sitting room, waiting for her to finish cooking. She shook her head in amazement, wondering when was the exact moment that Lanre ceased to be the center of her universe. Although she still loved him, no matter what happened, she would always love him. They had made some good memories together. Soara stared at the pot and remembered how the pastors' wives in their church had welcomed her, fawning over her as if she was a dignitary. They had announced to everyone within hearing distance that Soara was favored by God. God truly loved Soara. At that, one member of the congregation had commented, with a sly smile, that God had poured out an overdose of love on Soara and had little left to give the rest of them. Soara had pretended not to hear that comment. Soara knew she should have mentioned something to the pastors' wives, but she noticed the greedy glint in their stares, the envious twists to their mouths, and the longing sighs they made in Lanre's presence, and she kept silent. Instead, she organized women welfare programs, gave talks about empowerment to the young girls, and donated millions of naira into the church's coffers. The meat and fish were boiling merrily now. Soara put in onions, garlic, salt, ginger, and ground crayfish. Lanre was still on the phone. She heard him bark at the other person on the line, and that yell reminded her that the thread of the fabric of her perfect life had begun to unravel even before they got married. She had seen this, and she had ignored it. People would blame her. They would accuse her of being a gold digger, but they would be wide of the mark, because the main reason she married Lanre was because she was smitten with him. She clearly recalled the day that Lanre came visiting her in her room in the students' hostel, bearing gifts, including an expensive bottle of perfume, identical to another bottle that was sitting on her dresser. "Where did you get that?" Lanre growled when he saw it. "A friend, a classmate, a male student." The blow, when it came, rocked her head from one side to the other. Lanre punched her in the face. Soara was too stunned to cry. She stared in horror at her fiancé's enraged face and listened to the insults spewing from his lips. Words that hurt as much as the clout. He apologized later, of course, blaming his unreasonable anger and violence on his father, who had routinely beaten his mother. Soara forgave him. He was very contrite, and anyway, it was her fault. She had taken a gift from another man, even though she was engaged to Lanre. At present, many years later, remembering all the guilt she felt after that incident, Soara frenziedly washed the plantains and with shaking hands tore their skins off one by one. The last plantain she was peeling slipped from her grasp. With a loud, angry hiss, she picked it up and flung it into the sink. She stood for a moment, breathing in deeply. Then she washed the plantain, finished unpeeling it, and then calmly placed all the unpeeled plantains one by one in the pot. She could not hear Lanre anymore. He must have finished with his call and was waiting for his meal. And as Soara listened for Lanre, she recollected that the next time it happened, she and Lanre were married. She had been pregnant with their first son. They were having dinner with another couple at a swanky restaurant. Her phone rang. An ex-schoolmate wanted to catch up. The restaurant was noisy. She got up from the table to answer the phone. Lanre's eyes flared. She remembered that she paid for that action after the dinner in their car in the parking lot. He punched her in the arm, in her side. He yelled. His gaze burned and the spittle burst from his mouth, bathing her face. Soara cried out, "The baby!" But Lanre went for her throat. His hands gathered about her neck, he squeezed. Soara wept. There was a sharp pain in her stomach. She was choking. But then, suddenly, sanity returned. Lanre's hands dropped. He burst into tears, and soon after, drove them home. She was fortunate that she did not lose the baby, but it was her fault, Lanre snarled later. She made him do it. The meal was almost ready. Soara added the vegetables and watched as the beautiful green merged with the golden brown. The colors soothed her, and she thought idly, calmly, that Lanre would love this. She was not a fan of plantain pottage, which was just as well. Luckily, the cook had come in earlier and had put a dish of steamed potatoes and grilled fish for her in the microwave. It was also fortunate that it was just her and Lanre at home. Their children were spending the weekend with her parents. She missed them, although she was glad they were not here to see what would happen. Soara's thoughts returned again to her marriage. It happened gradually. The slaps and thumps soon escalated to belt whipping, punctuated by bouts of Lanre's penitential weeping. She had come to regard his sturdy leather belt as an extension of his arm. Soon, he stopped striking her on the face. No, that was too obvious. Her torso and thighs bore the brunt of his anger, places that her garments concealed. Her formerly smooth, fair skin was now marred with ugly, dark welts. Welts that Lanre kissed when the rage dissipated and reason returned. Although he made sure to remind her that it was her fault, her parents and brother did not know, and even if they did, Soara guessed that her mother would probably insist that she stick it out. The problem with this new generation is that they think they can end their marriages just because of a little rough spot. Soara could visualize her mother's mouth moving and these words coming out. Soara could see her father agreeing with her mother and averting his gaze from her injuries. Her friends did not know. They preferred to borrow money from Soara, the banker. They preferred to be seen with the stylish, always trendy Soara. They could not see Soara, the battered wife. They refused to see her, and Soara refused to tell them. She was a quiet sort. Some would refer to her as an introvert. She tended to keep things bottled up inside when she should have let it all out. But Soara reminded herself, even if she had let others know about her troubles, would she have received any help? And now she had arrived at this, some would say, drastic point. The women in church did not know. They were too busy wishing they were in her place. Lanre was handsome, posh, and wealthy and connected. To them, he was the dream husband. She was the luckiest woman in the world, so everyone said. So Soara smiled and remained silent. As Soara dipped her spoon into the pottage and scooped up a tiny portion meant for tasting, she recollected the day that one of the pastors in their church slipped his arm around her shoulder and hugged her just a little too tightly. Landry waited until they returned home. Then he shoved her violently into the glass door in the sitting room, accusing her of pouring herself to the pastor. The glass shattered. Fortunately, because Soara had held up her arms to shield her face, her beautiful face was spared. But her arms, body, and legs told a different story. She received numerous cuts. Her children screamed in horror at the sight of all that blood. Lanre rushed her to the hospital. He was sobbing, recounting to the doctors how, for some reason, his wife had walked into a glass door. The doctors nodded, refusing to comment on the fact that his wife was a regular visitor to the hospital. Lanre paid their exorbitant bills uncomplainingly. Everyone was happy, except Soara. No one asked her what happened. The doctors smiled reassuringly as they tended to her wounds, although their gazes were tinged with pity. They even refused to meet her eyes, and Soara let them. She knew that no one would help her. When she was discharged from the hospital, Lanre fervently promised on his knees that he would never hurt her again. He spoke at length about how much he regretted hurting her. She was the love of his life. He regretted that he was inadvertently teaching his sons that it was okay to beat a woman. He tearfully insisted that his actions would no longer perpetuate this cycle of wife abuse that his father had initiated. Soara listened quietly, nodded at appropriate intervals while she gulped down more pain pills. She allowed him to kiss her. She embraced her children and wiped their teary faces. All was well. After all, she was the luckiest woman in the world, wasn't she? Soara recalled the decision she had made that day, that last emergency visit to the hospital, the sight of the crisscross pattern of scars on her skin, and the fear shining from her children's eyes had been the last straw. That decision had led her to this point, and she had not wavered, not yet. As she saw it, she had two options: stay in her marriage, enjoy the wealth, and probably eventually be murdered by her husband or be divorced and alive but poor. She had read the statistics. 65% of educated women in Nigeria were victims of spousal abuse, and 92.7% of all abuse cases went unreported. She had heard of women who were murdered by their husbands, the children left motherless. Soara shook, her head pursing her lips. No, she would never leave her children alone with him, hence the need for a third option. She stirred the contents of the pot. Lanre entered the kitchen and headed straight for the refrigerator. He pulled out a can of beer, tore off the tab, and chugged half of the contents down his throat. He belched with a satisfied air, and no apologies. He was, after all, the man of the house, the ruler of his domain. Soara looked up. Her gaze traveled over her husband and settled on his increasingly expanding belly. Idly, she marveled at how much weight her husband had acquired over the years, mostly concentrated in his gut area. How weird he looked with a round belly protruding from his slim frame as if he was hiding their son's football under his t-shirt. He caught her staring and snapped, "What are you gaping at?" She opened her mouth to reply, and at that moment she realized that she too had changed, though not in the way he had. Hers was more subtle and gradual, catching her by surprise. She answered, "You have to watch all these beers you consume. You're getting a little bit of a belly." At once, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The storm clouds gathered. A tempest threatened. Lanre's eyes darkened. His brows coalesced and his hands tightly squeezed the can. Soara saw this. It was coming. And, as usual, it was her fault. She took a deep breath and dropped the spoon she was holding on the table in front of her, expecting a blow. The only sound that was heard in this still kitchen was the bubbling of the pottage. Then, grr-r-r-r-r, a sound emanated from Lanre's stomach. And just like that, the clouds receded. The sky cleared. Danger was averted, for now. Lanre's face broke into a warm smile, and he playfully clutched at his belly with his free hand. He sauntered to Soara, bent and kissed her on the cheek. She felt the iciness of his wet lips. "You see, I told you I was hungry. Hurry up with the food, honey. I am heading out in about 2 hours." Soara returned the smile, and as he turned and left the kitchen, she watched him go. Strangely, she felt as if the kiss had strengthened her resolve. She still loved Lanre, and she would always love him. But at this moment, she was certain that she loved herself more. She bent down briefly to pull open a bottom cabinet. Her hand was steady as she extricated the large-sized packet. Her hands did not tremble. She was not wavering. She had thought she would not be able to go through with it, and now she marveled at how composed she was. What did that say about her? But then again, she was the luckiest woman in the world, wasn't she? Soara gazed at the packet, wondering how much rat poison it would take to kill a rat, and how much to kill a grown man. She did not know. She shrugged and emptied the entire contents of the packet into the pot and mixed it all together. She served everything from the pot onto a deep dish. "Lanre," she called out gaily, "food is ready." The end. Thank you for listening, story lovers. Subscribe to this channel to get updates about other exciting upcoming audio stories by Aretan Wosu.